Hello and welcome back to English Podcast Voice, the place where we crack open the latest research stack to bring you a deep dive on how to become a more fluent English speaker. I'm your host, Quinn.
And I'm Riley. It's great to be back guiding you through this material.
We're tackling the single most painful frustration in language learning today. And I just know you've experienced this.
Oh, absolutely.
You spend months, maybe even years, you're studying so diligently, you nail the grammar tests. I mean, you can analyze a conditional sentence structure faster than a native speaker.
You know all the rules.
All the rules. You feel so confident when you read, and then the moment comes. You have to have a real-time, spontaneous conversation, and your brain just locks up.
Freezes.
Silence. Total awkward paralysis.
That feeling, that moment of intellectual and physical paralysis is so pervasive among language learners. It's really the ultimate hurdle.
Why is that?
Because speaking, language production is a completely different cognitive process from language reception, like reading or listening.
It reminds me so much of that story we read about Alejandro, the local celebrity.
Yes. What a story.
He was famous because he was an absolute master of imitation. He could hear any American accent, the thick Boston vowels, the soft Southern rhythm, the sharp New York cadence, and just mimic it perfectly.
He was brilliant at it. People were just captivated by his acoustic talent. He was even invited onto television to perform this incredible feat.
But then came the moment of truth.
Right.
In the middle of the show, someone leaned in and asked him the simplest, most common conversational opening in English. They just asked, "How are you?"
Nothing.
The mic dropped. I mean, not literally, but figuratively.
Yeah.
All that performance talent just evaporated, his smile froze, and he just offered silence.
And that story is so telling because it perfectly illustrates the central failure point for so many solo learners.
How so?
Alejandro had mastered the sound and the rhythm, that's the receptive skill, but he completely lacked the automaticity and facility you need for spontaneous output. Listening is only half the battle.
So our mission today is to prove, scientifically, that you do not need an expensive conversation partner or a willing talk show host to break through that barrier. We are going to unlock the scientific secrets behind why the audio you're listening to right now, the podcast medium, is the single most powerful tool you have for solitary speaking mastery.
We've got a remarkable body of research today. There's a controlled study that pinpointed 4 specific, measurable areas where using podcasts just generates massive improvements in speaking.
Okay.
We'll dissect the 2 core linguistic theories that make this all possible, and then we are going to give you the exact high-efficacy step-by-step instructions for the game-changing shadowing technique.
And because choosing the right model is so essential for this kind of practice, we're going to spend some time deep diving into the differences between American and British communication styles. And just a quick teaser for you.
Oh, yeah.
Get ready for a pop quiz on the subtle linguistic traps in just asking, how are you in different English-speaking cultures?
It's a crucial deep dive for anyone who's, trying to move from that B1 level to true fluency.
So before we jump into the hard data, if you were learning something right now, or if you just found that story about Alejandro totally relatable, please take a moment right now, ask your device to subscribe to English Podcast Voice.
And like this deep dive.
That small action really helps us reach more curious learners just like you.
It really does.
Okay, let's start with the big issue that prompted all this research.
Yeah.
Why is speaking ability, specifically, always cited as the biggest obstacle for English as a foreign language or EFL learners? Why is it such a huge problem?
Well, it's consistently the most challenging skill because it just demands maximum application. I mean, speaking ability is crucial because it's the ultimate expression of direct communication in real-world, authentic situations.
Like what?
Think about academic presentations or negotiations in a business setting or just navigating daily life in an English-speaking country. You can't rely on time to process. You don't have a dictionary. It's all immediate, spontaneous production.
That word you just used, crucial.
Yeah.
It feels so much stronger than just saying important. It feels really high stakes.
Let's pause and unpack that word right now because I think it sets the tone for the gravity of this whole challenge.
Absolutely. Let's do a deep dive. When we call something crucial, that's C-R-U-C-I-A-L, we're using an adjective to describe something that is extremely important or necessary.
Okay, but lots of words mean that.
Right, but the nuance is key here. Crucial often implies a decisive moment, a factor upon which the success or failure of something else completely depends.
Oh, I see. So it's not just important, it's like a turning point.
Exactly. So you asked how it differs from similar words, like important or essential.
Yeah, because I might use them all interchangeably.
And a lot of people do, but important is, a general marker of significance. Everything from tying your shoes to learning calculus can be important.
Sure.
Essential usually implies a fundamental required component like water is essential for life. You can't have life without it.
But crucial carries that weighty implication of criticality. It suggests that if this one factor fails, the entire endeavor, the whole project just fails. It's the linchpin.
The linchpin, I love that. It's the one piece that holds everything else together.
You got it.
Okay, let's hear some examples to see this criticality in action. Give us a work example and then maybe a daily life one.
Okay. For a professional context, securing the final contract signature is crucial for closing the deal this quarter.
Right, because if that signature doesn't happen...
The whole deal collapses. The stakes are very high.
Got it. What about a casual one?
For a more casual example, making sure you charge your phone overnight is crucial before a long travel day, or you'll be completely lost.
Okay, yeah, the success of my entire trip depends on that one action. I get it.
Now, what about a funny or weird one?
Let's hear it.
It's crucial that you don't wear socks with sandals if you want to be accepted by the fashion police.
Huh. The success of your social life depends on it.
Precisely. A historical example might be the Battle of Midway was crucial to the Pacific Campaign in World War II. It was a turning point.
And philosophically.
You could say self-awareness is crucial for personal growth. Without it, you can't really move forward.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, let's try a quick scenario role play to really cement this. We're colleagues, we're planning a major product launch, and it's under threat.
Okay, I'm ready. So, the design team is late on the mock-ups. Should we prioritize chasing them, or should we focus on prepping the marketing copy?
Right now, securing the legal sign-off on the distribution agreement is vitally crucial. We can write the copy later, but if we don't finalize that agreement, we literally have no product to sell. It makes everything else secondary.
I see. So the distribution agreement is the single crucial factor we need to resolve today. Okay, that makes sense. Let's focus on that.
See, the collocations really reinforce this high-stakes feeling. We say things like absolutely crucial, vitally crucial, or talk about a crucial role or a crucial factor.
And that vocabulary reminds us that speaking isn't just a nice skill to have. For professional success, it's a non-negotiable requirement. It's crucial.
Which brings us directly back to the research. If speaking is so crucial, how can learners improve it on their own?
Well, the study we looked at, it was a quasi-experimental study from Sultan Agung Islamic University with 60 students. It gives us the answer. They measured the speaking ability of a group that used podcasts against a group that used, conventional learning methods.
And this is where we need to look past the jargon and just focus on the sheer magnitude of the results. What did the podcast group prove?
They showed significantly greater improvement, and not just in one area, but across 4 measured components of speaking ability. Let's look at the score jumps.
Okay.
The podcast group didn't just win. They blew the control group out of the water, especially in the areas most tied to natural fluid speech.
Okay, so give us the score jump for the 2 areas that showed the biggest improvement.
The first major area was fluency.
The flow of speech.
Exactly. The podcast group jumped from an average pretest score of 5.5, which is, hesitant, halting speech, to a functional 7.2 on the post-test.
Wow. That's a massive leap.
It's a huge leap into confident communication.
That feels like the difference between someone who has to stop and, translate every single word in their head and someone who can actually participate in a fast-paced meeting.
You're exactly right. And the second major area, which showed the largest improvement overall, was pronunciation.
The sounds themselves.
Yep. That group went from a 5.3 to a staggering 7.5. This high level of gain is directly attributable to the constant acoustic feedback they were getting from high-quality audio models.
That's fascinating. So why do you think fluency, the speed and flow, and pronunciation, the sound, showed the most dramatic gains compared to, say, grammar accuracy?
Well, that's the scientific sweet spot of audio media. Podcasts provide constant, effortless exposure to the music of the language.
Music.
The natural pace, the stress, the rise and fall of the voice. These are aspects you just cannot learn from a textbook. The constant acoustic exposure reorganizes the motor memory needed for speech, making the physical act of speaking faster and more accurate.
So my brain is kind of absorbing the rhythm subconsciously, and that then translates to better speed and flow when I try to speak.
It's a perfect way to put it.
So what about the other 2 skills they measured?
Vocabulary range was also incredibly strong. The scores moved from a 5.2 all the way to a 7.4.
And why is that?
Podcasts expose you to new, high-frequency words in rich, meaningful contexts. That's so much better for retention than just memorizing lists of words.
Right, because you hear how the word is actually used.
Yeah.
And the final pillar, accuracy. So grammar and correct usage.
Accuracy showed a strong, reliable improvement as well. Now, the gain wasn't as explosive as with the phonetic skills, but it proves that listening to structured, authentic dialogue helps learners internalize correct grammar patterns without needing endless, boring drills.
You start to notice the patterns.
You start to notice them, exactly.
The evidence is pretty undeniable. But let's get into the theoretical engine behind it. Why does simply listening make you a better speaker?
For that, we turn to some foundational applied linguistics. The first pillar is concept 1, Krashen's input hypothesis.
Okay, let's dissect the input hypothesis. What's the core practical takeaway for someone listening right now?
The central idea is that we acquire language only when we receive comprehensible input that is just slightly beyond our current level of competence.
Comprehensible input. So stuff I can understand.
Yes, but with that little extra challenge, this is the famous I+1 formula.
I+1. Okay, tell me more about that. It sounds like a formula, but how do I apply it in real life when I'm choosing a podcast?
Think of it like intellectual resistance training or lifting weights at the gym.
Okay, I like that analogy.
If I is your current knowledge, the weight you can lift comfortably, then +1 is the small, manageable challenge, the slightly heavier weight.
So if I choose a podcast where I understand, like 95% of the content,
then you're only getting I+0. It's comfort listening. You won't grow. It's like lifting the same weight every day.
right, you're not encountering enough new material to force acquisition or muscle growth.
Exactly. But conversely, if you tune into some hyper-fast, highly specialized native show where you only understand maybe 40% of the content,
I'm just lost.
that's I+5 or I+10. It's
Yeah.
overwhelming, and your brain just treats it as linguistic noise. You tune out, and acquisition stops.
So the perfect podcast is in that sweet spot.
The perfect podcast is where you understand roughly 80% to 85% of the content, but you're still encountering new words and structures that force you to think just a little bit harder.
That Goldilocks zone analogy is perfect. You need that just right level of challenge. Okay, so input fills the knowledge tank. But we saw with Alejandro that input is not enough.
And that takes us directly to the second pillar, Swain's output hypothesis.
Okay, let's look at the output hypothesis. How does a seemingly passive medium like a podcast help with active language production?
Well, Swain's argument was that producing language, the output, is what truly forces learning and accuracy.
How does that work?
When you're forced to speak or write, you suddenly realize what you don't know. It forces you to notice the gap between your internal knowledge, the input, and your ability to correctly construct a sentence, the output.
Ah, the gap noticing. So the podcast provides the stimulus, and I have to provide the output moment myself.
Precisely.
Give me a specific scenario. How would I use a podcast as a springboard for output?
Okay, imagine you listen to a 5-minute news segment from a simplified speech podcast. You pause it immediately after the conclusion.
Okay.
Now, the task is self-summarization. You must force yourself to explain that news story out loud in English. That act of producing the summary compels you to retrieve vocabulary, construct grammatical sentences, and manage the flow of your ideas.
It's the difference between knowing the ingredients for a cake, which is the input, and actually baking the cake, which is the output. The podcast makes sure I have high-quality ingredients, but I still have to do the work of mixing and baking.
Absolutely. And this theoretical framework input feeding the brain with high-quality material and output forcing the application and accuracy checks, that's the scientific foundation for why podcasts are such a flexible and powerful self-study tool.
Okay, now that we know why we need consistent input, the next decision is, well, crucial. Which accent model should we choose for our solitary output practice?
When you engage in intense output practice, especially techniques like shadowing, consistency is just non-negotiable.
Why so strict?
Our sources are very clear on this. Choosing a single, clear model prevents phonetic confusion. It stops your motor memory from trying to reconcile competing sounds.
It's like trying to learn two different musical instruments at the same time and having your fingers mix up the positions.
That's a great way to think about it.
So let's solidify our understanding of the term here. Accent.
Okay, target vocabulary number 2. Accent, that's A-C-C-E-N-T. When we talk about accent, we mean the distinctive way of pronouncing a language associated with a specific region or social group.
And what's the practical difference between an accent and a dialect? People mix these up all the time.
They do, and that's a fantastic point of confusion for many B1 learners. So a dialect encompasses differences in vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation. Think of regional slang or specific sentence structures.
So it's the whole package.
Right. An accent is purely about the sound, the pronunciation, the rhythm, and the voice quality. You can share a dialect, like Standard English, but have wildly different accents, like Scottish versus Australian.
Got it. Accent is the how, dialect is the what. Okay, let's hear a couple of practical examples focusing on just the sound.
Okay, in a formal setting, maybe a research study, the panel was tasked with analyzing how strongly regional accents affected audience comprehension of the speech,
Okay.
more casually. I didn't realize she was from the area until I heard her slightly noticeable local accent.
What about a funny one?
I tried to do a pirate accent for Halloween, but I just sounded like a farmer from the West Country.
Huh. Okay, and historically.
You could say, the great vowel shift marks a historical change in the English accent over centuries.
And a philosophical take?
An accent is a linguistic fingerprint of one's origin, a map of their journey through language and place.
I like that. Okay, let's try a quick scenario about choosing a learning model for a friend.
Okay, so I'll start. I've been using a lot of BBC material, so I'm trying to develop a clear British accent. It's difficult.
I hear that. My focus is on the American accent because I plan to work in the U.S., and I really want to minimize communication barriers. For me, a native accent model is crucial for success.
It makes sense to stick to one model. Switching between a heavy European accent model and an American one, for instance, would just confuse your muscle memory for sound production.
Exactly. This way, I can develop a clear accent that people will understand easily.
The focus has to be on reliable production, which brings us to the two major choices: American English, or AE, and British English, or BE.
So let's start with American English.
Okay, American English, AE, is the dominant model globally in terms of sheer exposure, media, film, music. This makes it a very pragmatic choice.
It's just everywhere.
It is. And our sources suggest that AE pronunciation, particularly its strong rhoticity, is often considered easier for novice learners because the sounds are often more clearly enunciated.
And what is that key phonetic marker of AE?
Rhoticity. It's the full enunciated R sound at the end of words. Listen for it in words like car, teacher, or water.
Right, that hard R sound.
Resources like ESL Pod or Coach Shane focus heavily on this clear, forward-placed sound.
Okay, so now for British English, BE. Why might a learner choose this path instead?
BE is the preferred model if you're targeting work or academia in the UK, or you want to engage with specific Commonwealth cultures.
And there isn't just one British accent, right?
Not at all. There are many. But the standard model often used in education is received pronunciation, or RP. And that carries a certain cultural connotation of, sophistication or formality.
And the critical difference in sound production from American English.
BE is generally non-rhotic. That means the R sound is softer or virtually silent at the end of words, unless a vowel follows it. So they'll say ka instead of car.
Caught. Got it.
They also have significant vowel variances, particularly in words like bath or dance.
But the differences go way beyond just how they sound, don't they? The communication style itself is fundamentally different.
Oh, this is where the real nuance lies. And it reflects deep cultural expectations.
So what's the American style?
American communication style tends to be very energetic, enthusiastic, and it really leans into positivity. It's often high context and direct about excitement.
That high energy enthusiasm is almost an expectation in American settings. Like, you have to be great.
Exactly. Now contrast that with the UK. British communication style often tends to be more self-deprecating, ironic, and importantly, understated.
Let's pause for our vocabulary deep dive on understated. This word feels like the key to unlocking British communication.
It really is. So target vocabulary number 3, understated, an adjective. understated. When we use this word, we mean that something is presented in a subtle, quiet, or controlled way. It's deliberately not emphasized or flashy.
So how is that different from words like modest or subdued? They feel similar.
They are, but there's a subtle difference. Modest usually implies humility about one's own accomplishments. Subdued just means quiet or low-key, often because of circumstance, like a subdued atmosphere at a sad event.
Okay.
Understated, however, implies a conscious choice of elegance or control. It's a rejection of exaggeration. It's like saying, I am so confident I don't need to shout about my success.
That speaks volumes, actually. The confidence is in the quietness.
Mm-hmm.
Give us a couple of examples that capture that intentional subtlety.
Okay, in a professional design context, the new logo was intentionally understated, using only a single color, which gave the brand a sophisticated feel.
Simple but elegant.
Exactly. Or a personal example. His reaction to getting the promotion was very understated. He just nodded and said, right then, back to work.
While inside, he's probably jumping for joy.
Probably. A funny one could be, for a man who just won the lottery, his celebration was surprisingly understated. He just bought a slightly fancier brand of tea.
Huh. Okay, and historically,
British diplomacy, for centuries, has been known for its carefully understated tone in negotiations.
and philosophically.
You could argue that true confidence is often understated, while insecurity tends to be loud.
That's a great one. Okay, let's try a quick scenario role play. We're discussing winning a small competition, but we're reacting in a very British, understated manner.
Sounds good. So that was incredible. You finished the marathon first. How do you feel about your victory?
Oh, well, it was all right. I suppose I managed to avoid too much pain. My performance was, perfectly adequate. Nothing to write home about, really.
Adequate. You set a new record. That is perhaps the most understated victory celebration I've ever seen. Anyone else would be shouting from the rooftops.
Mustn't make a fuss. It's all about keeping things totally understated.
I see that. The collocations often tie to this idea of style or tone. You hear understated elegance, understated confidence, or even understated criticism. It's a very specific cultural marker.
And we see this most clearly in the "How are you?" dialogue test.
Yes.
The American response almost demands that energetic positivity. Great! Things are good.
Mm-hmm.
But the British response, relying on that understated tone, is often ironic self-deprecation.
Exactly. If a British person is having a perfectly average day, they will not say, great. They are far more likely to respond with, not too bad, or the classic surviving.
Could be worse is the ultimate British sign that things are going exceptionally well, isn't it?
It really is. They reserve true enthusiasm for moments when it's absolutely necessary. If you, the learner, choose the BE model for shadowing, you have to internalize that slightly reserved, understated tone to sound authentic. Otherwise, you'll just sound too eager.
And finally, a quick reminder of the practical pitfalls, the lexical differences. If you choose one model, you have to know its specific vocabulary.
Yes, to avoid the embarrassing mistakes, where Americans use the word pants to mean trousers.
British English uses trousers.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ask for pants in the UK, you are asking for underwear.
Which is a crucial communication trap. Another set. American candy is British sweets.
American restroom or bathroom is British toilet or loo.
And American garbage or trash is British rubbish or bin. Consistency in vocabulary, just like consistency in accent, is necessary for high-efficacy solitary practice.
Okay, we've made our choice. We have our podcast model. We understand the input-output theories.
Yeah.
But the listener's still alone in their room. How do they actually force the speaking part?
We have to start by reiterating the difference between concept 3, receptive versus productive skills.
Walk us through that separation again, because this is exactly where Alejandro failed.
Right. So receptive skills, listening and reading, are input. We absorb the language. They build our potential knowledge. Productive skills, speaking and writing, are output. We actively construct and apply the language system.
So let's expand that cake analogy from before. What's the difference between reading the recipe and actually baking the cake?
The recipe, which is reading, tells you that you need flour. Knowing the concept of flour is receptive knowledge.
I know what flour is.
But when you start baking, the productive part, you encounter real-world problems. Maybe the butter is too cold or you forgot the baking powder. You realize through the active output that you are missing specific skills or you have structural gaps in your process. You notice, I know the word mix, but I don't know the phrase fold in the egg whites gently.
That failure to retrieve the correct structure under pressure. That's the gap that Swain was talking about.
It is. So the ultimate technique to practice the solitary production is shadowing.
Okay, define it for us. What is shadowing exactly?
The shadowing technique is essentially speaking immediately after the source speaker, like an echo or ghost, with the intense goal of matching two specific elements, the speaker's pronunciation and their intonation.
Intonation is the key. It's the part of the language music that B1 learners often neglect. Let's do a deep dive on that word.
Yes, let's. Target vocabulary number 4. Intonation, a noun, I-N-T-O-N-T-I-O-N. Intonation is the rise and fall of the voice in speaking, and we use it to convey meaning, emotion, or signal grammar structure. It's how you modulate your pitch.
And how is that distinct from just volume?
That's a great question. Volume is simple loudness. Intonation is complex pitch movement. You can speak very loudly, so high volume, but with a flat, robotic intonation.
Right.
Conversely, you can speak softly, but use powerful rising and falling pitch movements to convey sarcasm or excitement. Intonation is the difference between a robot reading words and a human expressing emotion.
Got it. Let's hear a couple of examples where intonation is the core meaning.
Okay, in a presentation. Mastering appropriate intonation is necessary for signaling key points and transitions. Otherwise, the audience won't know where to focus their attention.
Okay, and in daily conversation.
If you want to express strong surprise, you must use a rising intonation at the end of the question, like, "Did you really do that today?" The rise on today shows the surprise.
Okay, let's try a spontaneous scenario role play, using intonation to convey emotion. I'm skeptical about a sudden change of plans you're telling me about.
All right. I'm sorry, but they just told us we have to switch offices by the end of the day.
Switch offices today.
I heard that rising intonation. Yes, we have to be out by 5.
5 o'clock.
And that was a sharp, falling intonation of frustration.
That's simply impossible. We need to practice a persuasive, calm intonation if we want to negotiate an extension.
Perfect. You demonstrated how intonation instantly communicates urgency and emotional state. And shadowing forces you to mimic these natural intonation patterns.
Which is crucial for sounding like a natural speaker, not just a correct one.
Exactly.
So shadowing is effective, but only if you do it correctly. The sources warned against mindless parroting. What are the 4 critical steps for high-efficacy shadowing practice?
This is the recipe for success. So, step A, initial passive listening.
Just listen first.
Yes, you must listen multiple times first. Do not try to speak until you fully understand the meaning and the natural rhythm of the dialogue. Understanding has to precede imitation.
If I start speaking immediately, I'm just making noise and reinforcing my own mistakes.
Precisely. Which leads to step B, scaffolding via transcription. This is the non-negotiable requirement. You must use the transcript.
Why is the transcript so important?
2 reasons. First, it engages both visual and auditory learning channels, which maximizes retention. Second, and more importantly, it allows you to confirm silent letters, word linking, and complex sentence structures.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Knowing that the T in the phrase "listen to me" is often silent when spoken quickly prevents you from trying to pronounce it and sounding unnatural. The transcript shows you the real words.
That twin-channel approach must dramatically reduce the chance of learning incorrect articulations. Okay, what about speed? My native speaker model is way too fast.
And that is step C, speed control optimization. If the native speed is too high, you must reduce the playback tempo, often to 75% speed.
Why is that so important?
Because the goal is accurate articulation and rhythm, not speed. If you rush, your mouth is still forming the English sounds, but they'll be imperfect and jumbled. Slowing down allows your motor memory to build the correct habits before you try to accelerate.
That's a massive shift in mindset. Focus on quality over pace. Okay, and the final step, step D, is about purpose.
Step D, intention. Every shadowing session must have a specific target.
Not just repeating everything.
No, you should ask yourself, are you focusing this time on the subtle linking of words, what we call connected speech? Or are you working on a difficult sound, like that's the sound? Or are you focused entirely on the rising and falling melodic pattern of a specific phrase?
So I target one component per session. Say I choose a practical dialogue, like ordering food at a busy cafe. I would focus only on the speed and intonation until I can reproduce it automatically and naturally.
Exactly. You turn the general task into a specific conquerable micro goal.
Okay, besides shadowing, how else can a learner use this medium to force solitary output?
We use the active language production techniques. First, active response.
What's that?
When we or any podcast hosts ask questions, you pause the audio and respond out loud. If we say, "What stands out to you about this cultural difference?" you literally stop the audio and articulate your answer in English.
That forces the spontaneous construction of language, even without a conversation partner. I like that.
Second, summarization. After listening to an episode, pause and force yourself to summarize the main points out loud in 60 seconds.
Okay.
And a crucial refinement. Try to incorporate 2 or 3 new vocabulary words you just learned into that summary. This pulls those words from receptive memory into productive use.
And we have to tackle the elephant in the room, using technology to provide the feedback that we don't get from a partner.
Technology is the new training partner. Use AI tools like ChatGPT or other specialized language models for conversational
Don't
practice.
just chat with it, though. Right.
Ask it specific output questions. You could start a conversation and then prompt it, please rate my last response on a scale of 1 to 10 for grammatical accuracy, and provide 3 specific correction points.
That's powerful. It turns the AI from a simple chatbot into a personalized grammar tutor. And for the phonetic element, the sounds we practice with shadowing.
For that, you use dedicated pronunciation apps like Elsa Speak or Bold Voice. You read a sentence, and the app uses speech recognition to analyze your pronunciation, giving you immediate granular feedback on tricky vowel sounds, consonants, and stress patterns.
I love the idea of starting with AI as your training wheels. It builds confidence and accuracy before you step out into the real world of the real person, where the pressure and stakes feel so much higher.
That's the perfect analogy for it.
Okay, so all these techniques depend on choosing the right input material. And that takes us back to the Goldilocks rule. Aim for 80% comprehension.
Yes, that sweet spot where we understand most things, but we are still challenged by new vocabulary and structures.
If it's too hard, I'll just get frustrated.
Precisely. If you are constantly looking up words or rewinding because you missed the point, you're not learning, you're just struggling. And that frustration kills motivation.
Speaking of structures, when learners move past the B1 level, they stop struggling with single sentences and start struggling with linking ideas together coherently. That's what you call discourse management.
It is, and this is arguably the biggest differentiator between an intermediate speaker and a fluent one.
So let's do our final vocabulary deep dive on that concept. Discourse management.
It's a big one. It's a noun phrase, and it refers to the way you organize and structure your thoughts and language to ensure your communication, whether speaking or writing, is understandable, logical, and easy for the listener to follow.
So a person might know all the right words, but if they lack discourse management, their speech might sound like a pile of brilliant but totally unconnected sentences.
Exactly. They lack structural coherence. They might jump from one topic to another without warning, or fail to use linking phrases like however, therefore, or in conclusion.
Give us a couple examples that show why this organized structure is so necessary.
In a formal setting, effective discourse management is an absolute requirement for successful contract negotiations, ensuring all complex terms are introduced and logically addressed.
Oh, okay, and casually.
I always struggle with discourse management when telling a complicated story. I tend to get excited and skip all the important background information.
I do that all the time. Okay, let's try a quick scenario role play. I need you to explain a complex 3-step process to me, demonstrating perfect discourse management.
Okay, ask away.
I need you to explain the key steps for logging into the new secure system.
Certainly. First, because we prioritize security, you must perform the 2-factor authentication, even if you are on a trusted network. Consequently, you will receive a 6-digit code on your mobile device. However, you must enter that code within 30 seconds of receiving it. Otherwise, the system will lock you out for an hour.
Good to know.
Finally, once you are in, remember that you must change your password every 90 days for continued access.
See, the use of first, consequently, however, otherwise, and finally, they acted like structural signposts. They held your complex explanation together and made it incredibly clear,
That is the essence of strong discourse management.
which demonstrates the crucial role of high-quality input in teaching these structural elements. Okay, let's quickly review the gold standard resources based on our source data.
For beginners or high beginners who are focused on that I+1 material, the simplified speech models are perfect. News in Slow English is fantastic because it presents current events at a controlled pace, making vocabulary acquisition much easier while also providing context.
And for the learner who has a busy schedule, maybe just a 15-minute commute every day,
For them, you need the short, concentrated models. We highly recommend BBC's 6-Minute English. The short format promotes rapid, high-frequency practice cycles, making it easy to fit the necessary repetition into a busy day.
and here's the budget-conscious advantage that is so crucial for high-efficacy solitary practice.
Yes, BBC's 6-Minute English is incredibly high value because all the episodes and, critically, the accompanying transcripts are available free of charge on their website.
Which means the non-negotiable requirement for accurate shadowing the transcript is available without a paywall.
It is. However, we should acknowledge the premium content model.
Paid stuff.
Right. Dedicated language providers like ESL Pod or Luke's English Podcast often charge for their support materials
Why do they do that?
because they recognize the pedagogical necessity of that material. The audio is the input, but the transcripts, the worksheets, the cultural guides. Those are the crucial tools that allow for accurate output practice and focused learning. So whether it's free or paid, the transcript is really the price of admission for effective shadowing.
Okay, we have the plan. But even with the best intentions, learners often fall into three common traps when using audio for self-study. I'll take on the role of the learner with a bad habit. What's the first one?
Mistake number 1, relying exclusively on passive listening.
Okay, here's my question then. My friend Kate listens to English podcasts all day, every day, while she's doing laundry, commuting, cooking. Her brain is just soaking up the English sounds, right? Can't I just use the podcast as background noise?
That is the most common self-deception. Passive background listening is good for maintenance, for reducing the feeling of the language being foreign. It helps you absorb the rhythm. But for actual improvement, especially for vocabulary and structural acquisition, it is nearly useless.
Why? If I'm hearing the words, shouldn't they eventually stick in my brain?
The human brain requires active listening for acquisition. When you multitask, you divide your attention. The research shows that you need to notice the new word or structure, what linguists call salience, for it to move from short-term memory to long-term memory.
So I have to be focused.
You have to resist the urge to multitask and focus intentionally, so you can summarize the main points and, crucially, write down or log new vocabulary. If you can't pause and summarize the last 2 minutes of what you heard, you were listening passively.
That makes a lot of sense. Active focus is required for that I+1 knowledge to be acquired. Okay, what about the old debate about grammar?
Mistake number 2, ignoring grammar study entirely.
I've heard that traditional methods focus way too much on rigid grammar drills. So, should I just stop studying grammar completely and rely only on listening input to pick up the rules organically?
This is an overcorrection. The sources make it clear that grammar study is still important for achieving accuracy, one of the 4 pillars we talked about.
So what happens if I only rely on input?
You might become fluent, meaning fast, but your grammar might be full of persistent errors that are really hard to correct later on.
So how do we study grammar without reverting to boring textbook drills?
The key is integration. The focus shouldn't be on abstract rules, but on noticing grammar in context. When you read a transcript, actively highlight the grammar structure you want to internalize, like the use of the passive voice.
And
Then, when you practice your output shadowing or summarizing, you actively try to produce that structure. Many high-quality podcasts integrate grammar lessons, showing the structure in authentic dialogue, which turns a rule into a real-world tool.
don't discard grammar. Integrate it into the productive process. Okay, and finally, the technical mistake during shadowing.
Mistake number 3, aiming for native speed perfection too soon.
I am so guilty of this. I try to shadow at 100% speed right away, but I end up stumbling, blurring my words, and just reinforcing terrible pronunciation habits. I sacrifice articulation for pace, and then I get frustrated and I quit.
You're skipping the speed control optimization step, which is absolutely crucial. If you're stumbling, you are cementing mistakes into your motor memory.
So what's the goal then, if not speed?
The initial goal of shadowing is not speed. It's accurate articulation and a clear rhythmic pattern.
So what should I do the moment I feel overwhelmed by the native speed?
Immediately reduce the playback speed, typically to 75% tempo. This gives your mouth and brain time to coordinate and execute the complex English sounds correctly, especially things like linking words and difficult vowel sounds. You build the foundation of accuracy slowly.
And then I speed up.
Once 75% feels easy and natural, the jump to 100% will be achievable without sacrificing quality. Patience in the initial practice phase prevents frustrating long-term errors.
Riley, this deep dive has provided such a clear, actionable protocol for our solitary learners. We've covered the science, the psychology, and the practical steps. Let's wrap up with a quick knowledge check for you, the listener.
All right, let's see how much you internalized today. First question. We discussed the subtle cultural differences between communication styles. Reflecting the concept of being understated, how might a typical British person respond if asked, "How are you?" when things are generally fine?
I know this one. They would avoid that over-the-top positivity. They might say, "Not too bad," or the wonderfully ironic, "surviving."
Perfect execution of the understated tone. Okay, next question. Diving into the theory. What are the 2 core hypotheses, the input and the output, that provide the scientific backing for why podcast learning is so effective?
That's Krashen's input hypothesis. which demands I+1 material, meaning comprehensible input that's slightly above my level. And then it's Swain's output hypothesis, which tells me I must actively produce language to notice my gaps.
You have nailed the foundation. Okay, final question. When you are speaking and trying to link several complex ideas together into a clear, easy-to-follow sequence, what is the specialized name for organizing your thoughts beyond the single sentence level?
That's discourse management. It's the framework that ensures structural coherence in your speech.
Excellent work. You have mastered the core concepts.
So let's quickly review our top takeaways in vocabulary. Today we learned that speaking is crucial, and podcasts significantly boost fluency, accuracy, pronunciation, and vocabulary range.
And those results are driven by the input and output theories, relying on high-efficacy shadowing, where you must pay intense attention to intonation and use a transcript to ensure accuracy.
Our 5 expanded concepts and words were crucial, accent, understated, intonation, and discourse management.
And now for your micro-challenge this week. We want you to put the short cycle practice model into action. Find a short 6-minute podcast segment, use the free transcripts from BBC 6-Minute English if you can.
Listen to that short segment actively. No multitasking. 3 times. Then pause it and use the word crucial to write or speak a 1-sentence summary of the topic. Force that output and use that new vocabulary.
And remember the philosophical implication of this entire journey. We started with the tragedy of Alejandro, the master imitator who couldn't communicate. Your goal isn't just to mimic a sound perfectly, but to use the language as a bridge.
Your ability to communicate, even in small, potentially awkward situations, is crucial not just for professional success, but for those profound moments of connection. When you use English to understand someone's perspective or to share your own story.
And what's fascinating is that the disciplined act of choosing an accent model and practicing its specific communication style, becoming aware of how or why someone is understated, is inherently an exercise in empathy. You are mastering a new cultural lens through language.
We hope this deep dive has given you a clear, achievable path to solitary speaking mastery. If you found this useful, please hit that like button and subscribe to English Podcast Voice.
Practice often, use those transcripts, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
I'm Quinn. See you next time.
And I'm Riley. Bye.